Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this March's special briefing on your next breach. Won't start at the firewall. It will start with your data. We appreciate you guys coming over here, coming over today. And David, I'm going to hand off over to you.
Hello, so my name's David Ramazetti. I'm a Director of Security Services here at Novacoast, and I specialize in anything endpoint, network, cloud, or data security related. So today we're here to talk about sort of data protection and where we sort of see that happening nowadays. One of the biggest things, even though it is a little contradictory to some of my practices that I work in, is really where breaches start and how to prevent them. The biggest thing is around, a lot of people think, firewalls, and that's actually, not what the attackers want. Essentially, they're active after your data. So what we're going to talk about in the next couple minutes is sort of how they go about things, where you can protect it, and go from there. Okay, so the hacker's real target. This is really what they're after. Is typically I tell customers they're after data, compute resources for, things like botnets, DDoS attacks, and then you have, sort of your type of activists. But typically they're really after your data. And the end goal is to get that data, but sometimes that data also becomes leverage, because with that data, they could do things like malware and ransomware. And from there, they're actually going to try to extort money out of you. So it's either data or money typically. And then we're going to look at the modern attack chain, because, like I said, with people thinking firewalls are going to protect them in today's day and age, that's not the case. And then top 5 budget priorities, sort of where, if I was in your guys' shoes, where I would look at putting my investments. And then sort of if you're started from scratch with a data security program, where to go, and sort of a plan to action. So we'll talk about the hacker's real target. So the first thing, which is just essential to get the skeleton key into the door, is credentials. So this is why, number one, from a security perspective, passwords really aren't enough. I have a pair that talks more identity than myself, but, doing things like MFA, YubiKeys, tokens, things of that nature, because credentials gives them that gateway into your network. And that's really how they get around firewalls. And we'll talk more about that. But once they do get in, then it's looking at financial data, PII, PHI, IP trade secrets. Those are the main things that they're coming for from a data perspective. For example, I originally from Detroit, Michigan, and I worked at a manufacturer firm. And before DLP existed, this is back in the early 2000s, an insider took and sold our patented powder coating process to the Chinese state nation. So those are types of things that a lot of people don't think about. And when we talk about some of the solutions coming up, I don't use really any vendors, but the big thing is when you do look at these solutions, make sure that you understand what type of data you need to protect, because a lot of solutions are good at text-based things. So, like Word, Document, Adobe. But when it comes to things like IP that's more CAD drawings or pictures, movies, music, it is a different animal. So we'll go to the next slide. So what's the end goal? First thing is, like I said, financial leverage is they're going to try to extort money out of you. Ransomware or, extortion, blackmail. Hey, we found this information about you. Regulatory leverage. So, basically saying, hey, if we let this go, you're going to face all these GDPR fines if you're over in Europe, or these PCI fines that you might not be able to take credit card data, or HIPAA. Reputational leverage, obviously, this is more around blackmail, but being able to take down a company, just nowadays, if you find out a company has a breach, people look bad at that. Competitive leverage, same thing, very similar, is, maybe your value-added reseller like us, and they find out, hey, people dropped out, was able to get our sales information, and now it's targeting our salespeople. That could look badly onto us. Operational leverage, this is even worse, more in like the OT environment, but they might be able to take down a manufacturing line. They might be able to take down new features in your HAS product. And then, just targeting executives in the human leverage. This is really, the blackmail portion of it. So the modern attack chain, so this is sort of really why protecting your data matters more than, firewalls today, and a lot of other solutions out there, unfortunately, is the initial access. I mean, if we were to take a poll on this call today, I guarantee you that if I asked how many people had an IR event and it was found out that they got through because of a breach on the firewall, I doubt anyone would say yes, or it'd be very minimal. And if I even went to my peer that runs our incident response group, it's very minimal, I would guess also. The biggest way this really happens is phishing, because what's the weakest link? Humans. That really is what it comes down to. So once you see the firewalls here, once they get those credentials, now they bypass all that. So that then they have, an identity that they've compromised. From there, that's why MFA tokens, things of that nature are really important, but they also have to be implemented securely, because once we get a credential and we have access, now we just start moving through the environment laterally. And the hardest part about this is they now look like your normal user. So once they start moving laterally, they're going to start looking to do a data discovery. So just like I'm going to recommend here shortly, is the same things you guys have to do around finding where your data is, they're going to do the same thing. And that's really where the real target is for them. And then once they find that, that's really when they're going to do the exfiltration, and encrypted, for ransomware. So if I was in your guys' shoes, where I would typically put a lot of the budget is, number one is going to be your identity security, because like I said, the main things and the main goal for the customer or for the attackers are going to be getting the identity, because that's their skeleton key to get to the data. So securing those accounts, and a lot of people overlook service accounts. They don't rotate their passwords. They don't know what service accounts they have. Service accounts might be provisioned as domain admins. So that's going to be your highest ROI. Then the next part is data security. Like a DSPM and DLP solution is number two, try to find out where your data is and what type of data you have, who owns it, and how secure it is. A lot of times I will tell customers to rely on their asset management system, but typically I would say 90 to 95% of my customers, when I ask them that, they say their asset management or CMDB isn't up to date. So when you do go through these data security discovery processes, it is a time that you can also help increase visibility and move that information into your asset management. The next area is your cloud security posture. So a CSPM, because on top of the data security posture management, that's going to tell you a lot where your data is, especially if it lives in the cloud. and on-prem, but the cloud security posture is going to see, okay, do I have S3 buckets that are open up to the world? Do I have resource groups on AWS or network security groups on Azure misconfigured that people have full access? So, right now we have your identity, where the data is, how secure it is in the cloud, and then next is really going to be your EDR, XDR, and NDR. So when I say XDR, I really look at it as a triangle. Is EDR and NDR are going to feed into your XDR so that you could correlate from an endpoint or from a network perspective everything that's going on. And part of that XDR should everything we just talked about, the identity, data security, and cloud security posture management, that should all feed into there. So you're able to correlate and see what's happening. And the reason I also bring up NDR is there's a lot of things in your environment. It could be OT, IoT, MIOT that can't have an endpoint agent. So we still have to see what's happening on those devices. Are they being compromised? Because what if you have a HP print server that no one updates, which is 90% of customers, that someone's able to get on because there's no NAT solution and they just walked in and they're using that as a gateway to get to your information. Now an EDR is out of the question because can't install an EDR on an HP print box. And then finally, your GRC and attack surfaces, number one, see where you're vulnerable from the outside. So your attack surface management, what are you exposing? VPNs are one thing that tend to expose a lot when people utilize that, but then also maybe third-party control of, hey, a vendor needs access to this machine, so we opened up RDP to this IP address, but maybe they could get compromised. That's really why you want to push towards sort of ZTNA type services, because you don't have that attack surface out on the internet. They're behind a cloud that you have to authenticate to before you can even see it. And then obviously look at your third party and supply chain, because how many breaches between like SolarWinds and some of the others came from that avenue. And then, compliance and your attack surface from vulnerability management, patch management, are your machines hardened to your standards? That's really where the GRC compliance perspective comes in. So these are the top 5 budget priorities I would suggest. Okay, so starting from scratch, and number one, like I said, you have to really discover where your data is. The hardest part is if you don't have an asset management system, you don't know what you don't know. So typically how we help customers, or how you can approach this, is you can look at tools like an open source one like Nmap. Start really discovering your network, see all the different subnets, what is exposed, are there FTP servers, are there UNC shares, NFS shares, and start seeing everything and documenting where you see those files that are possibility. Because the second hardest part is, depending on your security posture internal, it could be an endpoint end user that's sharing out his C drive to everyone because he wants to get to it from a VDI instance. So that's why discovery is really key, and really putting it into some sort of asset management type system. Even if you don't have one, I hate saying this, but use a spreadsheet until you can afford one. You have to track it somewhere. Secondly, once you start discovering that, start putting controls around it. So if you see shares, and there's a bunch of solutions that can help with this, but you want to see who has access to the shares, who's using it. Then around your identity, give least privilege, utilize MFA, put PAM on, the crown jewels. You really want to make sure that you're securing your data, you're securing your identity, And then the next step is to really reduce the risk. So from the like CSPM side and the DLP side, this is really where you're going to start look at, okay, I have open S3 shares, or S3 buckets. Let's reduce the risk there. Another thing that's really big is eliminate shadow IT. So this is one area that the firewall does help. Most firewall vendors will give you some sort of report for shadow IT. So for example, say you're a customer, you're a Microsoft shop and you utilize OneDrive. Well, you probably shouldn't see people utilizing Google Drive, Box, things of that nature. Well, you might have the HR department just spun up bots because it was easier and was able to get out of your control. Firewalls typically don't really just see applications. I mean, there is categorizations and you can fine tune this at firewalls, but they will help report of from a file sharing perspective, we see these 20 apps being accessed through. That will help you start doing acceptable use policies, put your standards around what's allowed and start securing those. So you might start blocking bots and, with different firewalls and different CASB type technologies, you could even say you're allowed to access our corporate OneDrive, but no one else's OneDrive. Once you start reducing that risk, you really do want to start detecting. So this is really going to be your EDR, NDR, XDR, your SIM, along with your DLP tooling. So this is really where we're going to start seeing how's the data being used. And part of this, you will also see broken business processes. Typically, when I was a post-sales consultant, we would do risk assessments and we would just monitor firewall traffic. And commonly, I would see FTP traffic going over the internet of payroll, HR data. Typically, in most cases, it was encrypted, but it still was going over an unencrypted channel. But you do want to understand why you see those broken business processes. And then the last part is your governance. Governance is key in this because if you don't start grading yourself, you never really know where you're getting better. And unfortunately, in cybersecurity, people and upper management can think of us as insurance salesmen because we're basically, if we do a good job, nothing happens. So when they implement, we'll say a DLP program, and it costs $1 million for a bigger organization to implement. The $1 million shows there's 0 breaches, but without DLP, say you got 2 breaches and you got fined $4 million, it's a lot worse, but it is hard to show because I have a lot of upper management people tell me, well, we haven't had an incident up to date. Well, unfortunately, I wouldn't say you haven't had one. You may not know of one. And even if you haven't had one, it's going to happen. And it doesn't matter if you're small or big. So sort of what I would start doing, as next steps is find your assets, find your sensitive data. Some of the areas I point out that helps if you don't have, an asset management system is, like I said, network scanning, cloud consoles, Active Directory, but I'll be honest, 95% of Active Directories that I've encountered are dirty. They have stale computer accounts, so definitely get those things cleaned out. IPAM DHCP logs. So if you have like info blots, even Microsoft Active Directory, see what machines are connected. You could at least get MAC addresses, do research on them, and then SSO logs. Because SSO now integrates in so many SaaS applications, when you do that shadow IT risk assessment, you could sort of put that side to side with your SSO of, we know we have these apps. Why are we seeing these other 50 apps? And then some of the areas on sensitive data that get a little hard is going to be typically databases. So when you start going around structured data, that is a little harder. But most DLP tools or classification tools can talk into databases. And one thing I always will bring up about, in our industry, we have so many buzzwords. So with DLP and classification and tagging, they start overlapping with what people think that meaning is. Some people will think of classification as tagging. So what tagging essentially is, when you open up a file, you're going to add metadata that, if we look at it from a federal government perspective, this is secret, top secret, or public. You're classifying it, but it's actually marking it with metadata tag. So that's really tagging, whereas classification is saying this is PII or this is PHI, and with tagging and metadata, we take that classification into a label. The reason that's important is it makes your DLP implementations a lot easier, because your rules are looking at, if I have these labels, do this, versus try to classify it on the fly, label it, and then take action. And then classification is really looking at a document, scanning it, and determining what type of file this is. Does it contain PHI, PII? Is it a CAD drawing? And that's where you really have to look at the tooling, because a lot of tooling out there that's classification, it's great at text-based, but when it comes to anything outside of text, so if it isn't an Office document, it's not an Adobe document, it will fall down. And you also want to make sure that it can write metadata, so whatever it classifies or tags it, you could use it in other systems, because some of them will put it in their own database. But once that file moves from, say, endpoint A up to file server B, until file server B gets scanned and classified, that product doesn't know that it's there. So it's not really protecting you. You want to make sure that you tag the data so it moves along with it. So, here's sort of an example 30-day tag action plan. So I would scan your subnets, start mapping out your network. Me coming from the network engineering side too, the number of times I've asked for a WAN diagram or a local diagram and not gotten it because they don't have it is probably in the upwards of 80%. So you don't know what you don't know. That's why the more information, the better. But then look in Active Directory, start enabling MFA and pulling DHCP logs. These are some things you can do, with no solution at all. Or obviously, we're a services company, so we'll gladly assist you in those areas. We too, start taking that information, documenting it into Excel spreadsheet or your asset management system. Start disabling stale and unused accounts, because just like with identity accounts, when you start looking at the asset management, you might find you have a file server that's an SCP server or FTP out on the internet in your DMZ that shouldn't be. You'd want to probably turn that off. So that's where firewalls get bad, is a lot of people don't keep up on their rule bases and don't do compliance reviews quarterly or yearly. But then, like I said, start scanning for file shares. So for the sensitive information. Now, this is going to require a little more. You will need some sort of tooling. One thing that we can help, we do, to give business justifications. If you reach out to us, we can do free risk assessments. Typically what we do, it's sort of over a week or two, we will set up a POV in your environment and sort of scan one file server just to see how at risk you are, and help put together a business justification to help sell the business on why you need a data security program and tooling like that. And then look at misconfiguration audits. So there's a lot of vendors we work with that can do POVs to help see this and help give you business justifications to sell this. And then, weeks 3 and 4, start reviewing the data, documenting the findings, and then putting that business justification together. So here I just put together sort of some metrics that if I was in your all shoes, what leadership would want to see. So percentage of sensitive data classified, so that you understand that you have 10 terabytes of data, but only 20% of it has been scanned. So you're 80% at risk. Users enrolled in MFA, typically you want that to near 100%, obviously service accounts and whatnot. So how you actually write these KPIs matters. And at Novacoast, we also have a data analytics practice that can help in this. Overprivileged accounts remediated. So there's tooling that will look at, hey, this is a domain account. It's in, or domain admin installed on 50 machines. It only needs to be on 4 of them. And it could only be a local admin if you added these local logon rights. Mean time to detect, obviously the quicker we detect, the quicker we can remediate. And if you look at a lot of breach reports, you'll see that a lot of times breaches go unnoticed for the last count was like 290 something days. So showing that trend going down is very helpful. Critical vulnerabilities on your crown jewels. If you don't have an asset management system while you're doing these scanning, you should start assigning CIA values to your assets so that you know what your crown jewels are. A lot of people will know, okay, we have our SAP system for financials, we have Workday for time cards, etc. You'll want to make sure that you understand what's important, because when you remediate vulnerabilities, you probably want to remediate PeopleSoft, SAP before a print server. And then exposed data stores found and secure. This just really shows that you're moving your program forward. So the bottom line is really the attackers want your data, not really the network. The network's just a mean to the end. Really, the new perimeter is identity. So definitely get your identity secure. You can't protect what you don't see. Just like I said, you don't know what you don't know. So discovery becomes very important. And then nowadays, always assume you've been breached. And that's why detect and response isn't non-negotiable. And if you think about it, a lot of cybersecurity insurance won't even cover most corporations now if they don't have an EDR. So that's everything I have. And I guess if we have 2 minutes, if there's any questions, comments.
Thank you so much, David. We have a few minutes left over for questions. You can go ahead and put them in the chat. Let us know if you guys have any questions. Appreciate everything you did today, David, and letting us know.
Sure.
And then thank you everybody else for attending. We appreciate your time being here with us today. We will be providing the slides and the recording after the briefing. As soon as the video becomes available, we'll be sending that out.
All right, perfect. Thank you, everyone.
Awesome. We'll leave it open for a couple more seconds before it's the top of the hour, or before it's the half hour at the end here. They say they love the hair. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. I think with that, I don't see any questions. David, thank you so much for today. Thank you everybody for attending. We appreciate it. You guys have a great rest of your day.
Right. Thank you.